Level 1. Negative balance. 6:42 in the morning. The first thing you checked wasn't the weather. It wasn't the news. It wasn't social media. It was your bank account. The banking app slowly loaded. For a brief moment, everything looked normal. Then, your eyes stopped. Available balance, minus $5. You refreshed the screen. The number didn't change. Your account was overdrawn by $5. An old cloud storage subscription had renewed overnight. Before you could even finish reading the transaction, your phone vibrated. A new notification appeared. Overdraft fee, $25. You stared at the screen. $25 for being $5 short? The fee was 5 times larger than the purchase itself. The penalty for being broke was becoming even more broke. Before you could even process what had happened, your phone buzzed again. Another automatic payment. An $11 music streaming membership you completely forgot about. The payment tried to process. Your account was already negative. Seconds later, another notification appeared. Additional overdraft fee, $25. Now you owed about $66 because of a $5 subscription. You called customer service. "Thank you for calling," the automated voice said. "Your call is important to us." Then came the music. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 12 minutes, 21 minutes. Finally, someone answered. The representative introduced herself, reviewed your account, and after a brief pause, she spoke. "I'm sorry, but those fees were applied automatically according to the terms of your account and can't be reversed." You asked if someone else might be able to help. She offered to submit a review request. Someone would get back to you within 48 hours. Nobody ever did. The next morning, things became even more expensive. Your electric bill payment failed. The utility company added an $85 late fee. A few hours later, your internet bill was declined, adding another $28 penalty. The problem that started with $5 had now turned into more than $179, and it was growing in ways you never approved. On Wednesday, you skipped lunch. Not because you were trying to save calories, because you simply didn't have the money. You walked past your favorite sandwich shop, pretending you weren't planning to stop there. You kept walking. A few blocks later, a coworker caught up beside you. "We're grabbing lunch. You coming?" You smiled. "Nah, I already ate." It was a simple lie, one almost nobody notices, because financial stress rarely looks dramatic. The truth was, you hadn't eaten since breakfast. At this point, hunger wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was quiet. Friday finally arrived. You walked into your local bank branch, hoping someone could help. The lobby looked exactly like every bank commercial. Bright lighting, comfortable chairs, fresh coffee near the entrance. You waited for your number. Finally, your turn arrived. You stepped up to the counter. The teller listened carefully, then pulled up your account. For a few moments, the only sound came from the keyboard. Click, click, click. Then, the answer. "The charges were applied automatically. They're valid under the account agreement. I'm sorry." Her expression changed. Not anger, not sympathy, just distance. In that moment, you stopped feeling like a customer. You felt like a warning on a computer screen. Because to the bank's computer, you were simply an account, showing signs of financial uncertainty. You stepped outside the bank, looked back at the building, and realized something. Nothing about the bank had changed, only the way it looked at you. And this was only level 1. Level 2, the survival zone. A few weeks of overtime, canceled subscriptions, skipped lunches, saying maybe next time more often than you would like. Little by little, the negative balance disappeared. For the first time in weeks, your checking account showed something different. $247.36. It wasn't much, But after everything you had been through, it felt like a victory. You promised yourself no more overdraft fees, no more surprises. For the next 2 weeks, you checked your banking app every morning, sometimes twice, sometimes 5 times. Not because you wanted to, because you had to. Every purchase became a decision. Coffee at the gas station? No. Ordering takeout? No. Streaming another movie? Maybe next month. Every dollar had a job before it even reached your account. For the next few weeks, everything went exactly according to plan. Your paycheck arrived, your bills were paid on time, nothing bounced, and nothing failed. One Friday morning, your phone buzzed. Monthly maintenance fee, $15. You frowned. Maintenance? For what? Another fee, another deduction, another reminder that simply having a bank account wasn't always free. You opened the details. This fee is waived for customers maintaining a minimum daily balance of $2,000. You looked at your account again. $247.36. You laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes laughing hurts less than getting angry. You were paying the bank to protect money you barely had. That night, you opened your laptop. If saving money wasn't enough, maybe building credit was the next step. You searched. Best beginner credit cards. One offer looked promising. No annual fee, cashback rewards, simple application. You filled everything out. Income, address, employment, social security number, then clicked Submit. For nearly 20 seconds, a loading circle spun across the screen. Finally, the decision appeared. Not approved. Instead, the bank offered you something different, a secured credit card. To receive a $300 credit limit, you first needed to send the bank $300 of your own money so they could lend it back to you and charge interest if you used it. You read the offer twice, then laughed quietly to yourself. They want me to prove I have money before they'll trust me with money? You closed the browser. 3 days later, life reminded you that emergencies don't wait. You walked outside after work, turned the key. Nothing. Your car wouldn't start. A mechanic arrived 30 minutes later. After a quick inspection, he looked at you and said, "Looks like your battery's done. Replacing it will be about $230. You checked your account, then checked it again. There wasn't enough. If you bought the battery, rent would become a problem. If you waited, getting to work would become the problem. Sometimes, being broke isn't about choosing between something good and something bad. It's choosing which problem hurts less. The next morning, you borrowed your neighbor's bicycle. The repair shop couldn't replace the battery until payday. Your commute, normally 20 minutes, became almost an hour. By the time you reached work, your shirt was soaked with sweat. Your manager glanced at the clock. "Everything all right?" You nodded. "Car issue." Your manager understood, but you noticed something. When financial problems follow you into work, people rarely remember the reason. They only remember that you were late. A few days later, you walked back into the same bank. This time, you weren't asking about overdraft fees. You wanted to understand the maintenance fee. The teller was helping the customer ahead of you. She smiled, asked about their vacation, laughed at something they said. The conversation lasted several minutes. Then it was your turn. The smile faded. Not completely, just enough. She greeted you politely, pulled up your account, explained the fee, printed a brochure, and handed it to you. "Anything else I can help you with?" You wanted to ask more questions, but somehow it felt like the conversation was already over. "No, I'm good." You turned around. The customer behind you stepped forward. Almost instantly, the smile came back. You walked toward the exit, holding a brochure you never planned to read. Nobody had been rude, nobody had insulted you, and nobody had refused to help. but somehow you still left feeling smaller than when you walked in. That's when you realized something. Banks don't always tell you where you stand. Sometimes they show you. Not with words, but with time, with attention, with the way conversations begin and the way they end. At around $250, you weren't seen as a valuable customer. You were simply another account, trying to stay above water. And in the banking world, that's a very different place to be. As you walked back to your car, you couldn't stop wondering if this was how the bank treated everyone or only people whose balance looked like yours. The answer was waiting at the next level. Level 3. The Trust Zone. A year passed. Not a lucky year. Not an easy one. Just hundreds of small decisions made over and over again. You stayed disciplined. You stopped buying things you didn't need, cooked more meals at home, and picked up extra shifts whenever they were available. Slowly, your savings began to grow. $500, $800, $1,000. One Friday afternoon, your direct deposit hit. You opened the banking app. The balance refreshed. Available balance, $2,538.74. You stared at the number for a few seconds. It wasn't life-changing, but it was the highest balance you have ever seen. For the first time in a long time, you weren't worried about paying next week's bills. You could finally breathe. Not because you were rich, because you had options. A few weeks later, you walked into the same bank again. The same building, same lobby, and the same coffee machine near the entrance. But somehow, this visit felt different. When your turn came, the teller greeted you with a smile. She looked at your account, then said something you had never heard before. "I noticed you've built a nice savings balance. Have you ever thought about opening a high-yield savings account?" A year ago, nobody was offering you ways to grow your money. They were explaining fees. Now, the conversation had changed. The bank wasn't looking at your problems anymore. It was looking at your potential. The teller printed a few papers, explained how the account worked, how much interest you could earn, and how easy it would be to transfer your money. For the first time, you weren't being sold something because you were struggling. You were being offered something because you had money worth keeping. As you left the branch, your phone rang. It was the bank. You answered. "Hi. We're just calling to let you know that you may qualify for one of our unsecured credit cards." You paused. Unsecured. No security deposit, no cash held as collateral. The bank was finally willing to trust you. Not because they knew you personally, because the numbers on their screen had changed. A few days later, the new credit card arrived in the mail. You held it in your hand for a moment. It looked almost identical to every other credit card. Same size, same shape, same plastic. But to you, it meant something completely different. It was proof that your financial reputation had started to change. That weekend, you met an old friend for lunch. While waiting for your food, he looked at you and smiled. Things seem different. You look less stressed. You laughed. "I think I finally sleep through the night." He nodded. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy peace of mind. And sometimes, that's even more valuable. Over the next few months, you noticed other small changes. Your banking app started showing personalized offers, higher credit limits, pre-approved loans, savings recommendations, investment articles. The bank wanted you to stay, not because they cared who you were, because you had become more valuable to them. Then, one afternoon, you walked into the branch again. The line was unusually long. You expected to wait. Instead, a banker recognized your name. "Come with me. I'll take care of you over here." It only saved you a few minutes, but those few minutes said something. Banks measure value differently than people do. Sometimes, the difference between waiting in line and skipping it is just a few extra zeros in your account. At around $2,500, you finally started to notice something. The rules hadn't changed. The bank hadn't changed. Only the way it responded to you. For the first time, you weren't invisible anymore. You had become someone worth keeping. But compared to what was waiting at the next level, this was only the beginning. Level 4, the valuable zone. Another 2 years passed. No overnight, not because you won the lottery and not because someone handed you an opportunity. You simply stayed consistent. You kept saving, kept investing, kept saying no, when everyone else was saying yes. Little by little, your savings continued to grow. 5,000, 8,000, 12,000. Then one afternoon, your paycheck landed. You opened your banking app. Available balance, $20,184.63. You smiled. Not because $20,000 would change your life overnight, but because you remembered the day your account showed negative $5. This felt impossible back then. Now, it was real. A week later, you stopped by your bank during lunch. You only wanted to deposit a check, that's all. As you waited, a woman wearing a business suit walked toward you. She smiled. "Good afternoon, Mr. Brooke." You looked surprised. "Yes." She reached out her hand. "I'm Sarah. I'm one of the relationship bankers here. I've been reviewing your account, and I was wondering if you had a few minutes to talk." Reviewing your account? Nobody had ever said those words before. A year ago, you were waiting on hold for someone to explain overdraft fees. Today, someone had been reviewing your finances before you even walked through the door. She invited you into a private office. Not a huge office, but it had comfortable chairs, a large desk, and a glass wall overlooking the lobby. She offered you coffee, water, tea. You politely accepted a coffee. As she pulled up your account, the conversation felt completely different. She wasn't talking about penalties anymore. She was talking about opportunities. Have you thought about opening an investment account? Do you have a retirement plan? What are your long-term financial goals? Nobody had ever asked you those questions before, because a few years ago, your biggest financial goal was making it to the next paycheck. Now, the bank wanted to know where you wanted to be in 10 years. She explained different savings options, investment funds, certificates of deposit, retirement accounts. The meeting lasted almost 45 minutes, and not once did you feel rushed. When it ended, she handed you her business card. "If you ever need anything, you can call me directly. Your call is important to us." You walked out of the office, looking at the business card in your hand. It didn't seem like much, just a small piece of paper. But you understood what it really meant. For the first time, you had a name, not just an account number. Over the next few months, small things kept changing. Your ATM withdrawal limit increased. Your daily spending limit increased. Credit card offers became more attractive. Loan interest rates became lower. One afternoon, you decided to apply for a car loan. You expected another long process. Forms, phone calls, weeks of waiting. Instead, the banker smiled. "Based on your relationship with us, you're already pre-approved." Those words sounded strange. Just a few years ago, the bank wanted a security deposit before trusting you with $400. Now, they were offering to lend you tens of thousands. Nothing about you had changed overnight. You were still the same person. The only thing that looked different was the balance on your account. And somehow, that changed the way the financial world treated you. A month later, you walked into the branch again. Before you even reached the front desk, Sarah looked up from across the lobby. She smiled, raised her hand. "Good to see you again." She remembered your name, not because you had become famous, not because you were important, because your money had made you memorable. That's when something finally became clear. Banks don't build relationships with everyone. They build relationships with customers who are becoming more valuable. At around $20,000, you stop feeling like another customer. You become someone worth investing time in. And once a bank starts investing time in you, the next doors begin to open. Because the next level is where VIP treatment really begins. Level 5. VIP Treatment Zone. 5 more years passed. Not because life suddenly became easier, because your habits never changed. You kept investing, kept saving, and kept letting your money work while you were asleep. Some years were great, some weren't. The market went up, then down, then back up again. But you didn't panic. You stayed patient. One Tuesday morning, while drinking your coffee, you opened your banking app. Your eyes stopped on one number. Available balance, $152,846.91. You leaned back in your chair, not because you couldn't believe it, because you remembered exactly where this journey began. -$5. That number still lived in your memory, but now it felt like another lifetime. A few weeks later, your phone rang. The caller ID showed your bank. You answered. "Good morning, Mr. Brooke. This is Sarah. I wanted to let you know that you've qualified for our preferred banking program." Preferred banking? You had never heard of it before. She explained the benefits: a dedicated banker, priority customer service, lower loan rates, higher transfer limits, discounts on certain banking services, and invitations to exclusive financial events. She asked if you had time to stop by the branch. The following afternoon, you walked through the same front doors. But this visit felt different. Before you even reached the reception desk, Sarah was already walking toward you. "Welcome back. It's good to see you." She led you upstairs, not to the main lobby, to a quieter floor you had never noticed before. The room was calm, large windows, comfortable leather chairs, fresh coffee, cold drinks, no waiting line, no number to pull, and no crowded lobby. Just a quiet place where people talked about money. Sarah handed you a folder. Inside, everything was neatly organized. Information about your accounts, investment performance, retirement projections, possible tax-saving strategies. She wasn't trying to sell you another bank account. She was helping you make decisions. The conversation lasted almost an hour. Nobody looked at the clock. Nobody interrupted. When you had questions, she answered every one of them. As the meeting ended, she smiled. "If anything comes up, here's my direct number. You can also email me anytime." Not customer service, not a call center. Your banker, a real person. The next month, you noticed another change. You needed to transfer a large amount of money. You expected security checks, phone calls, waiting periods. Instead, the transfer was completed quickly. No problems, no unnecessary delays. Because customers at this level are treated differently. Not because the rules disappear, because the bank already trusts you. A few months later, you applied for a mortgage. You expected weeks of paperwork. Instead, most of the documents had already been prepared. Sarah already knew your financial history, your income, your savings, your investments. You weren't introducing yourself. You already had a relationship. The approval came much faster than you expected. Driving home that evening, you couldn't stop thinking about something. Years ago, you spent 21 minutes listening to hold music just to ask about a $25 overdraft fee. Now, one phone call connected you directly to someone who knew your name. The difference wasn't the building. It wasn't the employees. It wasn't even the bank. It was your financial value. Banks call it relationship banking. The relationship doesn't begin because they know you. It begins because they know your money. At around $150,000, you're no longer just another customer. You're someone they want to keep, someone they don't want to lose. And once that happens, the experience changes again. Because beyond this level, money doesn't just buy convenience. It starts opening doors that most people never even know exist. Welcome to Level 6. Level 6. Zone where the rules change. It didn't happen quickly. In fact, most people would have quit long before this point. 3 more years passed. The investments kept growing. Businesses became more valuable. The money you earned started earning even more money. One quiet Sunday morning, you poured yourself a cup of coffee, sat down on the porch, and opened your banking app. You looked at the screen, then looked again. Total balance, $2,083,417.58. You didn't celebrate. You didn't shout. You simply smiled. Because reaching $2 million was never about the number. It was proof that patience had finally caught up with time. A few days later, your phone rang. It wasn't Sarah this time. The caller introduced himself. "Good afternoon, Mr. Brooke. My name is David. I'm with our private client division. I'd love to schedule a meeting whenever it's convenient for you." Private client? You had never been invited into that world before. The following week, you arrived at the bank. But something felt different. You weren't asked to wait. The receptionist greeted you by name. "Good morning, Mr. Brooke. David is expecting you." She walked you down a quiet hallway. No teller windows, no customer line, no people waiting for their number to be called. Just private offices, conference rooms, and quiet conversations. David welcomed you with a handshake. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." He wasn't interested in opening another checking account. He wasn't trying to offer you a new credit card. The conversation had completely changed. "Tell me about your family. What are your long-term goals? Have you thought about estate planning? Do you have a trust? What about protecting your assets?" Years ago, the bank wanted to know if you could afford a checking account. Now, they wanted to know how you planned to protect your wealth for future generations. David introduced you to specialists, an investment advisor, a tax strategist, an estate planning expert. Each one focused on a different part of your financial life. It no longer felt like visiting a bank. It felt like assembling a professional team. Over the next few months, the changes became even more noticeable. Large wire transfers happened with a single phone call. Investment opportunities arrived before they were publicly advertised. Loan approvals moved faster. Questions were answered almost immediately. Your banker wasn't reacting to problems anymore. He was helping you avoid them. One afternoon, you needed financing for a commercial property. The building cost several $1,000,000. Years ago, you would have spent weeks collecting paperwork. This time, David already knew your financial position, your assets, your businesses, your investment history. The meeting lasted less than an hour. When you stood up to leave, he smiled. "We'll take care of the rest." That was it. No endless forms, no explaining yourself, no trying to prove you were trustworthy, because at this level, trust had already been established. Driving home, you remembered something. Years earlier, you were charged $25 for being $5 short. Today, the bank was willing to lend you millions. Not because you had become a different person, because you had become a different customer. That's when you finally understood something. Most people think banks make money from fees, and they do. But that's not where the biggest money is made. The biggest profits come from customers who already have money. That's why private banking exists. Not for everyone, only for the people the bank considers its most valuable clients. At around $2 million, you stop asking the bank for financial advice. The bank starts asking how it can help you. And beyond this point, there is one final level. A level where banking barely resembles what most people experience. A level most people will never even hear about. Level 7. The Truth Zone. Another 4 years passed. Making money wasn't your full-time job anymore. Managing it was. Your investments had grown. Your businesses had expanded. The assets you bought years ago were now worth far more than you ever imagined. One quiet evening, you were sitting in your backyard, watching the sun go down. Your phone buzzed. It wasn't a payment alert. It wasn't a bill reminder. It was your monthly portfolio update. You opened it. For a few seconds, you just stared. Estimated net worth: $10,842,763.18. You slowly locked your phone. Not because the number shocked you, because it reminded you of someone. The person who once worried about being $5 short. That person still lived inside you, only life had changed. A few weeks later, you received an invitation. Not an email, not a text message, a printed invitation. Heavy paper, your name embossed on the front. The bank was hosting a private dinner. Only a small number of clients had been invited. That evening, you arrived at a luxury hotel. The ballroom was quiet. No advertisements, no booths, no sales pitches. Just a handful of people talking over dinner. Business owners, investors, company founders, families whose wealth had been built over generations. Nobody asked, "What do you do for a living?" Instead, they asked, "What are you investing in next?" The conversations were different. The opportunities were different. Even the introductions were different. Later that evening, your private banker walked over. "I'd like you to meet someone." One introduction became another, then another. Before long, you weren't just meeting successful people. You were building relationships with them. That's something most people never see. At this level, banks don't just protect your money. Sometimes, they introduce you to the people who can help you grow it even more. A few months later, you needed financing for a new investment. You expected another meeting. Instead, your private banker called. "We've already reviewed everything. You're approved." That was the entire conversation. No explaining, no convincing, no proving yourself. Years ago, you waited 21 minutes just to ask about a $25 overdraft fee. Now, a single phone call moved millions of dollars. The difference was almost impossible to believe, but it was real. By this point, you finally understood something that had been true all along. The bank itself never really changed. The building stayed the same. The logo stayed the same. The employees were still friendly. What changed was your value to the bank. And at level 7, you weren't simply using the bank anymore. The bank was competing to keep you. Because here's the truth most people never hear. Banks don't make their biggest profits from customers with empty accounts. They make them from customers with substantial wealth. The more money you have, the more valuable you become. And the more valuable you become, the more the entire banking experience changes. It's the same bank, same front door, and same logo on the wall. But depending on how much money you have, it can feel like 7 completely different worlds. Most people believe banks treat everyone equally. The reality is much more complicated. Every account has a balance. Every balance has a value. And every value unlocks a different experience. The higher you climb, the fewer fees you pay. The faster people answer your calls. The more doors quietly open. Not because you're a better person, but because, to the bank, you've become a better customer. And that's the part nobody talks about. Not because it's a secret, but because most people never stay in the system long enough to see every level. Now the question is, if you walked into your bank tomorrow, Which level do you think you're living in today?